Good to go. Okay, we're going to talk about seasons changing here. As you can see, the weather's changing. Outside, we got rain today. I wasn't expecting that. And sometimes that can happen on us in the fall. Sometimes it gets colder just within a week or so. Conditions can change, the temperature can change, and the lighting changes as well with the changing daylight. And so with that, we see a spike in accidents and a spike in claims and different injuries and things that happen associated with the weather and the lighting. And so we want to talk about, creating an awareness today about things we can look for, things we can see in our facilities, in our vehicles, and the places we walk. We want to look at things that we can do to prevent the accidents that come along with changing seasons. So we'll look at that now. So here we are. Changing seasons, we see these spikes. We need to be aware of these things. We need to prepare ahead of time, and we'll look at some different types of equipment and tools and things that you might need to keep yourself safe throughout these changing seasons as we go through that. So ready or not, winter's not too far out. It's coming, and now is the time to prepare for that. Those of you that go up in the mountains, you might find some snow. I know this past weekend I went up to a little road that I go up frequently this year, and as I'm going up, I noticed that it's a lot more muddy and a lot more slick and wetter than it has been all year. So these changing conditions might catch us off guard if we're not planning ahead for our travel and the things that we do. As I went up a little bit farther, I also found some snow, and I know up in the higher elevations right now there's been snow, and if you're not ready for that, it can catch you off guard. So we want to prepare now, think about what we can do to keep ourselves safe with these changing seasons. Winter's really not too far out if you think about it. So one of the things that we see with changing seasons is the day length. You'll notice if you go outside in the evenings, it's getting darker earlier. The mornings are staying darker, and it changes that time of the sun. And sometimes that angle of the sun changes as well, that as you're driving down the road, you can get that glare on your windshield at certain times that you're not used to having it, and it can catch you off guard there. So it's important that we think about, the lighting, the daylight hours, and things that might change. Sometimes that glare can be so bad on your windshield with the different angle and the amount of light at certain times that sometimes you just can't see, and you're better off pulling off and stopping on the side of the roadway, or clearing your window using your wipers and spraying it off to get it clean that you can see to drive safely. So think about that. Think about the lighting. Sometimes night driving, there's more night driving now. You may be used to going and doing things in the evenings or early morning hours and having some light, and you might find that it's dark all of a sudden at these certain times, and that's something we need to be aware of as well. So watch for those things as we go about our daily work and things that we do. This time of year with the seasonal changes, there's also activity changes. Kids are doing different things. They're back in school as of about a month or so ago, and there's activities in the evenings. There's different routes that they might be playing at different times in different places. That's something to be aware of as you're driving down the roadways, to be aware of. Travel patterns change with the seasons. Even animal migrations, there might be some moving to lower elevations or crossing highways where you might be traveling. It's important to remember that there are some changes with the seasons that go with this. One of the biggest things is temperatures. You'll notice that here in Utah it can change very rapidly. You can go from a nice sunny warm day to a really cold wet day. It can change really fast, and so we need to think about that. Think about the clothing you wear. Think about the slips and falls that can happen, whether it's the type of footwear that you're wearing or different conditions you might be walking through at times. Think about those different risks that are there. So it's a good time to think about those. Good time to look at your facilities. Look at the places where you work. Maybe you might start seeing some ice form. You might see some icicles or some light snow, maybe some frost on the ground. Some of these things are things that can catch us off guard if we're not thinking ahead, and it's a good time to think about that before winter hits and before we get into the really cold weather. So it's a good time to take a walk around, look at your facilities, find things that might become buried with a good heavy snow. Know the locations of things in parking lots and around the buildings, and where utility shutoffs are. Those are things you want to identify. Make sure everything's ready to go before that winter time hits. One of the best things to do is stock your doorways. In entryways, it's a good idea to have snow shovels out before the snow and the ice starts coming out. Have the shovels ready. Have some salt to put down. Have things that you need to keep the place clean and free of slip hazards there. So floor mats, rugs, those things all want to be maintained and ready to go before the wintertime hits to prevent the accidents. So those are good things to think about. As Jason mentioned, we have many different trainings coming up. We have our defensive driving training in November, and it's a good time to think about that with winter driving. Having your vehicle prepared for that, learning to drive defensively regardless of the weather conditions. And our training topic this year is on drive to live, basically to save your life by being a defensive driver. So we encourage you to sign up for those things and get your staff trained on defensive driving and things that they need for the weather changes. Other trainings you might want to consider are emergency procedures, what to do in cold weather, slip, trip, and fall prevention. We see a lot of increase in slip, trip, fall type injuries this time of year with different surface conditions with the weather. So different trainings, make sure your staff get the training that they need. There's lots of different types of footwear. Make sure you have the right footwear for the task that you're doing, for the type of job you're doing each day, whether that's having good traction on your shoes or your work boots. Get the kind that's best for you, that has a good friction that can keep you from slipping and falling. You might even consider specialized equipment. Here's an example of some ice cleats. You might want to have those available, or other, warm weather related or cold weather related clothing that you need to keep yourself warm. Maybe it's reflective clothing with gloves or coats or things that you need to be safe out there in the cold weather. So consider the equipment that you have. It's a good time to look at facilities, as we mentioned, with the fall. You can often get a lot of fallen leaves that can clog gutters and storm drains and downspouts. It's a good idea to check those things now, make sure that they're clear, that everything's cleaned up, that there's not going to be any backups or problems with water and rain and snow melt throughout the winter. So check those things now. Look at your window wells, any type of drain, anything around the facility that might need to be cleaned up. Another good idea this time of year is to look at piping, look at the water systems that you have. My city recently, where I live this past weekend, they turned the irrigation water off to the city, and they did a good job of notifying the residents and telling us all about it. It's a good reminder this time of year to go and drain your sprinkler systems, blow out the lines, make sure that everything's getting winterized and ready for the winter before it happens, that you don't have pipes break or that you don't have valves open that aren't supposed to be open. So do a good inspection and a walk around and check those things at this time. It's a really good time to do that. As I mentioned, one of the things that we see a lot is just accidents from the weather-related items. The snow, the ice in the walkways. Maybe it's on the outside of one of your public buildings, or maybe near a workshop where your employees are walking. It's a good idea to check those things out, do an inspection on it regularly to make sure that there's no hazards where people can trip and fall. Pay good attention to parking lots. We see these happen sometimes where people simply from walking from their car to the building slip and fall on these weather-related conditions. And so it's a good time to take care of those, make sure everything's ready. When you do clear things off, when you do repair things, do some documentation, make sure that that's all ready to go there and that it's sealed and maintained. Maintain those surfaces that people walk on. It's a good way to prevent accidents, especially with the changing seasons there. As mentioned, one of the best things we can do is be prepared with our driving. It could catch us off guard if we're driving across the state. Maybe we're going over a mountain pass or somewhere where we weren't expecting snow or ice, and it can catch us off guard. So think about doing those things now as we're getting into colder, wetter seasons with the winter coming. Check out your vehicle. Make sure that it's ready to go. Maybe have an emergency kit inside and make sure that you get training you need to drive safely in those conditions. This is a good reminder for all of us, and I love this picture. It reminds me of some of those really cold January mornings where I have to go out and pry the car door open. And it's so cold outside sometimes that I don't often want to scrape the whole windshield clear. And it's important. It's a good reminder for us that, you got to clear the whole windshield, make sure you can see in the front and the rear view behind you, and also your mirrors. And so take the time to clear it fully. Don't take that risk of driving down the roadway with only being able to see a little bit, and make sure your windshield is clear and defogged and that you don't have those problems there. So consider being prepared with the vehicle. Have the ice scrapers available in the car now. You don't want to be caught off guard with that and find that you're in an icy condition or got snowy conditions and you don't have a brush. It's a lot easier to use that brush and scraper than having to do it the hands-on way. So check your car, make sure your scrapers are in there. Take a good look at your tires. With the wet conditions and snow, make sure you have some really good tread on there, possibly even putting some snow tires on if needed, or get new tires as needed. It's a good time to check those things out before winter hits. check all the conditions of the vehicle. Look at the maintenance of the wipers. You know, are they in good condition? Do you have plenty of washer fluid? Look at antifreeze and the battery. It's a good time to do that now. So before we find ourselves in an emergency, and before we get into these winter, cold weather and situations like that, it's a good time to check your car. Have your gas tank at least half full. That's a recommendation we have before you go anywhere in the cold seasons. If you were to get stranded and had some gas in your car, you could at least run that and keep yourself warm with the heater in there. So that's the recommendation, to keep your gas tank half full. Have a cell phone that's charged. Take a charger with you. You may want some jumper cables, first aid kit, or other emergency items in the car. Things in case you do get stranded or in case you need some help. You'll have some things that you need to get by for a little while. And as any time of the season goes, with changing seasons and even summertime, it's always important to have some of these emergency items on hand in the car. Have the things you need to keep yourself safe. Maybe it's a tow strap, maybe it's a blanket to stay warm, the hazard triangles to put out on the roadside. Have some equipment in your car and things that you need to avoid the problems there. I like to keep some water bottles in my car all the time. I keep them in the doors, and sometimes just some little food items in there, especially if you're going on a long drive. It's a really good idea to have those things. And so this is kind of a reminder for us. We talk about changing seasons and things that we encounter. Sometimes it catches us off guard. We want to be prepared for those things. As mentioned, there's a spike in accidents that we see during changing seasons. As we get into colder weather, we see a lot more slip, trip, and fall type things, and it's important that we talk about this and create that awareness, because if we can look for those things now and get things in place and be ready for it, we can prevent a lot of hassle and injury and accidents that way. And so let's make sure we're doing inspections. Look at our facilities, do a walk around, check things out now before the winter hits, start to weatherize things and get things ready for the winter time. And look at the places you're walking. Pay attention to those surfaces. Think about the equipment we need. Check your vehicles. It's all important that we take the time to look for these things and prepare for them and document the things that we do. And in the long run, those will prevent the accidents if we're ready for it. And so that's kind of the goal of the training today, the webinar today. Create that awareness and be ready for these changes as the seasons are changing now. And with that, I'll ask if there's any questions. Jason, do you see any?
I was actually just going through some comments. I asked, I sent out a question and said, what do you do to prepare for changing seasons and winter? And Debbie, as always, has helped us out a lot. She gave a pretty extensive list. I was just going through that, and she brought up some interesting things. So not questions, but some comments that are important. Things like their operation, as far as changing over fuel in tanks to a winter mix of diesel. That can. I remember this last winter on my family's farm. Even though we changed over to a winter mix, we still had some equipment that wouldn't operate when we got down near 40 below zero. And so those are some good points. And she talked about carbon monoxide is another great preparation as well. As we start up our heaters and that, verifying that those are working, verifying that vents are going right. So a couple of great points that Debbie brought up. I think
those are great.
Like yeah. Anything else? That's
it. Everybody be aware of the changes. Enjoy the fall season. It's changing quick.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. We appreciate that great reminder to help keep us safe, because those changes can produce some scary conditions quickly. And so keep that in mind, and use today as an opportunity to go out and make some of those changes. Take a walk around your facility, see what there is that we need to get ready. So awesome. Thanks, Brent, very much.
Thank you.
We'll wrap this up now, and then at 10 o'clock, I'll be presenting on risky volunteers. How do we effectively use volunteers in our operations and not get into the bad situations that potentially can come from that? So if you haven't signed up for that, make sure that you send me an email to jason@utahtrust.gov, and I'll send you a link right back. But do it quickly. as we try to get ready. Sometimes I miss those emails if it's after we start. And just one other thing that Debbie brought up, she asked, how do we get credit for everybody that's in the room watching these webinars? And the answer is, tell us. Send us an email and let us know that who's in the room. If you want to pass a sign-in sheet, which is really what you should do to maintain for your records, but if you want to take a photocopy and send that in, or just type it into an email and send that in to us, and we'll track that in our records. So then if you say, hey, who's attended our training, we can give you that information back. So, all right, I haven't let Doug talk yet. I think he's got anything to say.
He's probably working on something.
I would have said something.
You would have said something. All right, guys. Thank you very much. I hope everybody has a great day. Be safe out there.